Hello there my music lovers, I'm Josh from Audiophile-Heaven, and today we'll have a look at the CEnTrance DACPort HD. So what if I told you that you can have a full Class A amplifier, a DAC, all in the price of $180 US? Today we're talking about USA and why USA makes pretty awesome DAC/headphone amplifiers. The DACPort HD from CEnTrance is a unique device because they sport a very high output power, very good overall volume and driving power, all at $180 for a portable device. So don't get me wrong, this is all for portable. This is going to work with smartphones, with pretty much everything that is portable. Sadly, it has only a micro USB interface, so you may need to be a bit careful while using it. And the unboxing experience is not that overwhelming. You get a USB cable from Type A to micro USB. You also get the unit in a little pouch, and this pouch is very useless. Because it doesn't really offer a lot of protection to it, because it is pretty loose and pretty soft, and at the same time you can't really use it while having it in a pouch, and I'll explain in just a moment why. There is also a bit of paperwork, and that is pretty much everything there is inside the package. You don't really get anything else with the DACPort HD. So it must sound so good that it warrants its price point of $180. It is a very high price point actually. The unit is pretty basic looking at least, and it is actually pretty cool, if you ask me, to have such a tiny unit and know that it is a full-sized Class A amplifier. It has so much driving power. I actually had it set on low and I still thought it was louder than most headphone amplifiers at this price point. And don't get me wrong, this is not just an amplifier, this is also a DAC. It can even decode DSD. So you have the full plate here. I mean, the only thing missing from this thing is MQA, and if you need MQA, you are not going to get it from the DACPort HD because it cannot do MQA. MQA can still be done from the app in Tidal, so you don't really need to worry that much unless it was very essential to your situation, in which I recommend the DACs from iFi because those do support MQA in general. The CEnTrance DACPort HD has a few features, actually very few features in it, and that is an interesting part because the actual physical device is not that interesting. It has this face where you can see the name and everything about it. It also has a back which is empty. It has a headphone output in the 3.5mm option and format, so basically you do not have balanced either. So if you wanted balanced, or if you have balanced headphones, you should probably look for something else. But just let me tell you this, the power this thing has is higher than most balanced outputs in today's market at the same price point, so it can actually do a bit more than FIO BTR5 in terms of driving power, of overall clarity and overall detail, and also in overall impact. So although it doesn't have a balanced output, it's not that relevant. It is made for full-sized headphones. It can really drive or bear dynamic, even the 600 ohm variants. So even Sennheiser HD 660S is actually doable for the CEnTrance DACPort HD. So this is pretty much what you get if you really need a ton of driving power. It is a bit hissy with very sensitive VMs, so Campfire Atlas did reveal some hiss. So if you have very sensitive VMs, I would recommend keeping in mind that you will hear a slight hiss. It is not terrible, but it is audible, especially at very low listening volumes. Usually when I listen at my typical listening volumes, which are pretty high, I don't really hear this hiss, but it is something you may want to take into account when purchasing the DACPort HD from CEnTrance. As you can see, the unit is pretty tiny. It does draw quite a bit of power from your smartphone, so I would recommend keeping this in mind. It is a pretty power hungry. It is Class A, which means that it is running continuously. It draws the most power out of most portables in this world. It is one of the most power hungry portables. So although it has a beautiful sound, it has a lot of driving power, it has excellent comfort, dynamics, and pretty much everything, at the same time it really draws quite a bit of power, and there is a cost for everything, and the cost is the battery of your smartphone. I would recommend this if you have a smartphone with a ton of battery life, so Xiaomi Redmi Note series or Xiaomi Mi Max series or anything that has a ton of driving power, because otherwise you are going to be quite a bit disappointed about how shorter your smartphone's lives become. Most smartphones today have a very poor battery life, and I also did a few reviews on smartphones if you are interested, smartphones that you can use for audio actually, and how you can use those for audio. But the CEnTrance DACPort HD also has a volume wheel. Here on the rounded corner you can find the volume wheel. It is a pretty nifty feature to have a volume wheel on a device this tiny. The volume wheel is not digital, it is analogic, which means that it has very clear boundaries between which it can move. At the same time, the volume wheel also has enough play. It is granular enough. You can adjust the volume granular enough, so you don't really have very sudden increases in volume or decreases. You are pretty much free to use it. The USB port is just a micro USB port, which makes it pretty old-fashioned at this moment. It is 2020. We already almost have flying cars, and this thing still runs into a micro USB port, which is pretty disappointing to me. At least I don't really like the micro USB port, because this one is the easiest to break. The Type-C is not impossible to break either, and I even managed to damage somehow. But the point here is that I wouldn't really recommend playing too much with it, like outside. I would recommend it more as of an inside device, or as of something that is strapped to your phone and you have very short cables and you have very good cable management, because otherwise you'll just hear a crack at some point and it is not going to work anymore. Setting the button from low to high or from high to low when it comes to gain is actually pretty complicated, because the button is very recessed, and that is a good thing because it means you are not going to randomly change the volume while it is in your pocket. That is actually a pretty good thing, and you really wouldn't want to play with that volume, because you may end up really blowing up your eardrums. You may end up deaf if you did so, because the high gain is even stronger than the low gain, and on the low gain it is able to drive most headphones out there. This is like probably the strongest micro and mini sized DAC/headphone amplifier, so it really has a place in today's music world. The only downside to it, as I said, is the battery life of your smartphone while using it. Now I am going to compare it to a few other DAC/headphone amplifiers. The first that comes in mind is the Audirect or the Healy DAC Beam 2. The Beam 2 is more interesting in terms of aesthetics, but this one is also larger. This one consumes more power. The DACPort HD is more power hungry. At the same time, the CEnTrance DACPort HD has more overall control, a more natural sound, a smoother overall treble, because the Audirect Beam 2, at least to my ears, was pretty bright. It had quite a strong treble, it has less overall bass quantity, and the overall sound was a bit digitalish, where the DACPort HD is not digital at all. This is a very analog sounding overall DAC/headphone amplifier. So if you are really looking for a beautiful sound, I would do recommend this one, and I do recommend it with pretty much every single headphone or EM out there. Since it is pretty natural sounding, you don't have to worry or to be concerned about what it will pair with and what it won't pair with very well. Usually when having something like this, you would be concerned that it doesn't really pair very well, or that it doesn't really match with your headphones, and that was a problem for me for a really long while, because I was concerned what would pair with what. But the CEnTrance DACPort HD pairs with pretty much everything. There are very low chances to have something which has a 3.5mm cable by default but doesn't really work with it. For example, it won't really power Audeze LCD2C, and that is to be expected. That one is one of the hardest to drive headphones in the entire world. If you need something to power that one, I do recommend FIO Q5S or IFI XDSD or even Earman Trump, something that has a battery of itself and which is even larger in size. The DACPort HD does get the closest to powering the LCD2C from Audeze, and this is pretty much what I would recommend if you need a very high power, small or portable DAC/headphone amplifier. You could even compare the CEnTrance DACPort HD to the IFI Mini ESD Black Label, which is the mini one. I have reviewed that in writing on Audiophile-Heaven, and compared to that one, I feel that the CEnTrance DACPort HD is considerably more powerful. It has way more driving power, it has more punch, it is a more dynamic overall presentation with more bass, more treble, the mid-range feels more naturally presented. Every single thing about the sound just feels more real, while the Mini ESD Black Label feels a bit recessed in everything. It feels a bit smooth, it is very smooth all around. The CEnTrance DACPort HD is not quite that smooth. In general, it is more natural, it has way better presented for general listening, because the Mini DSD Black Label was very well if you paired it with very bright and very analytical EMs. This one can pair with pretty much everything and still sound pretty amazing. So versatility is for the CEnTrance DACPort HD. This one does not decode MQA though, while most IFI devices have been updated to decode MQA at this point. Since the CEnTrance DACPort HD is priced at $108 US, it can actually compete with the Iffy Hip DAC, which is the blue flask thingy. And I will be honest with you, when using and when comparing both, I actually ended up thinking that this one is more powerful, it has more punch, more dynamics, more overall power, but at the same time it draws so much power from your smartphone that I end up using the Iffy Hip DAC a bit more than the CEnTrance DACPort HD because of that, and the CEnTrance DACPort HD tends to have a bit too powerful of a sound, especially if you have EMs, so it may have a bit too much hiss, while the Iffy Hip DAC doesn't have that much hiss. So it is not all bells and whistles, it isn't all butterflies and meadows, it has some downsides to it, so nobody can really make a perfect device, but it will be perfect for you if you have a lot of headphones, if you have a very large collection, and if you need something that can drive everything, then it will be right for you. If you want a portable DAC which does not have a battery, if you are afraid that the battery will die in time, it is perfect for you. If you like this overall ergonomic and this overall shape, because it is very tiny, don't forget it can decode DSD, it can decode high resolution files, it is just MQA it cannot decode. Pretty much everything else is in for the CEnTrance DACPort HD. I thank you for watching. I hope this video has been enjoyable to watch. I hope you'll consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Also, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed this content. Don't forget I have some links if you want to donate and to help me out in the video description. I hope you have a lovely weekend there, and we'll see each other really soon. Bye bye!